welcome to the Sports Speak Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Ripchik.
And I'm your co-host, Tanyon Loose.
This podcast is going to be a weekly thing where we talk all things Penn State sports other than football. If you want to listen to a football podcast, give the Collegian Football Podcast a listen. But we're going to cover all things basketball, wrestling, hockey, soccer, and a bunch more Penn State sports.
So we're going to start every one of these off every week with a quick segment on our favorite news of the week. So I'm just going to let Spencer start us off here. So what was your favorite news of the week, Spencer?
My favorite news was women's volleyball coming back and beating Northwestern 3-1, advancing to 12-4 on the season. It was a big bounce back win after its first conference loss to Nebraska, and Joni Parker has been leading the way. Has literally been killing it with 207 kills on the season and is leading the team towards the top of the Big Ten. But next game is a pretty easy game against Rutgers, but they'll need that confidence to take on the top ranked Purdue on October 17th. How about you?
Yeah, that was definitely a huge bounce back win for them. I particularly like the Penn State men's soccer news this weekend. They took down Michigan on Sunday 2-1, and that extended their winning streak to 3, keeping them atop the Big Ten standings. Daniel Bloyu got the scoring started in the 48th minute for the Nittany Lions before Michigan ultimately tied up the game with a penalty kick in the 57th. But Michigan ultimately ended up costing themselves the match in the 68th with an own goal, and that came directly after Michigan's Derek Brooke picked up a red card for them. So Penn State's going to have a few important games coming up, so hopefully they'll continue their strong start.
On the topic of men's soccer, who do you think Penn State's biggest threat for the title is?
I really think it's Wisconsin. I mean, they're sitting at number 2 in the standings right now, and they already have a few big wins in the season. There were 2 of the 3 teams directly behind them in the standings. They took down Maryland and Indiana, who have both been perennial powerhouses in the Big Ten. So they play Michigan on Friday, who Penn State just squeaked out a win against while playing with a man advantage. So if they get that win, that sets up for a tremendous showdown against Penn State in both teams' final game of the season.
Yeah, I like that. But although they're the second highest team in the Big Ten, the Badgers are not the highest ranked team in the United States Soccer Coaches Poll. Maryland is actually the highest ranked soccer team, and because they have the best overall record in the Big Ten at 8-2-1, which is tied with Penn State. And they're the only loss, or they have 2 losses, one to Georgetown, which they lost 1-0, and Georgetown's the best team, and Wisconsin, which is your team. But Maryland was playing with 10 men as Brett St. Martin was given a red card, which kind of slowed down the team a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I like to bring up your point there that Wisconsin just took down Maryland, and that red card actually came after Wisconsin already took the lead in that game. But, I mean, I think Wisconsin just has a lot going for them. They have a phenomenal defense. They're allowing less than a goal every other game, so less than half a goal a game. So it's just phenomenal from them. They've only allowed 5 goals and 2 assists all season. So that second number really stands out to me there. The fact they're giving up 2 assists in the entire season just shows that it takes a really great player to make an incredible play just to get by this defense. And they've also yet to give up a penalty kick all season, which shows just how experienced this back line is for the Badgers. They've played 4 in the back for the majority of the games this season, and 3 seniors and 1 junior have predominantly been the starters. So they're not going to make many mistakes back there. It's going to be tough to crack.
Yeah, Wisconsin's defense definitely sounds pretty tough. But on the other hand, Maryland's offense is the 3rd highest scoring offense in the Big Ten behind Indiana and Penn State. And I really like how they spread out the offense. There's not just one guy carrying the load. There's 10 different players with at least a goal. So I think they don't really have one person they have to depend on to score all the goals. They spread the wealth a lot, and I really like that for them. And their remaining schedule it's pretty tough. They have Indiana and Penn State in the last 2 games, which are 2 of the top teams. But they also play MSU, who's 0-2-2, and they don't have a win in the Big Ten. And then Delaware, who has an overall record of 1-8-1. So, I mean, they have a couple of easy games before they take on Penn State and Indiana, which should be pretty cool.
Yeah, I want to go back to your point there about Maryland really spreading the wealth out. I'm not really sure if that's always a good thing for some teams. I mean, I made the point that Wisconsin's only given up 2 assists all season, so it's really been hard for teams to kind of pass around them and set up their teammates. So if Maryland doesn't really have that one kind of guy who can go out there and just be like a lightning rod and get them a goal, it could be a struggle for them against teams with a strong defense like Wisconsin. I mean, this season Maryland has allowed more goals than Wisconsin, yet really has a similar offensive setback in that fact where they don't have a clear-cut goal scorer. So, I mean, I also want to go back to your point about Maryland's schedule. I know that I'm just really looking forward to that Wisconsin-Penn State game.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to highlight that quick. They're the polar opposites of each other, really. The Nittany Lions have 2 players with 5 goals and another with 4 at the time that we're recording this, while Wisconsin has just 1 player with 3 goals and only two more with more than 1 in just 1 less game played than the Nittany Lions. So this is going to be a battle between an offensive powerhouse and a defensive juggernaut, really. I mean, when you look historically across all sports, it's been a struggle for that offensive team to really get a win. So, I mean, if I'm the Nittany Lions, I'm worried about this Wisconsin team.
Mm-hmm. I'm also worried. I'm worried about the Maryland team just because of that 10 different players with the goal. I don't know if Maryland has the defense to lock down. I mean, not Maryland. Penn State has the defense to lock down all those players. I know they can. It's very easily to like double one guy, but if you have 10 guys that can score, that's pretty impressive. So.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point there, really. I also want to highlight not even the players in the Wisconsin team, but the momentum that this team has right now. I mean, Wisconsin really did not have a strong start to the season. They lost or tied in their first 7 games, including exhibitions, so if you want to count those, that's up to you. But they're now unbeaten in their last 7 games with just 1 draw. So like Penn State, the Badgers really have an experienced coach who has a squad playing really, really well right now. And so he's made the necessary adjustments to get this team back on top of the conference up there with Penn State. So it's going to be a good showdown. Just have to wait till the end of the season to see how it plays out between the 2 teams.
Yeah, the last thing I just want to touch on is Maryland's and Penn State's history for the last 5 meetings. Maryland is 2-2-1 with Penn State, which is kind of even for both of them. And they played better at College Park, which the game is in University Park, so it doesn't really help me. But it should be interesting and definitely a game to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one as well. So speaking as coaches, I mean, I just brought up the Wisconsin coach there. I mean, me and Spencer had the bright idea that we saw something online to really is taking a coach and then saying what his job would be just based off of the profile that we found. So we just have a quick disclaimer that this is just purely for comedic purposes. This is no means meant to demean any coaches at Penn State, just humorous between us, and we hope that we can get a laugh out of everyone. Yeah, I'm going to get us started here. So when I look at a Rob Cooper, it just strikes me as someone that I know that owns a Ford dealership. I feel like this man just wants absolutely every person on this planet to be in a Ford F-150 driving around there. So I think Rob, definitely a Ford dealership owner.
So next up is our new head basketball coach, or Penn State's new head basketball coach, Micah Shrewsbury, and I could just see him as a police officer. He's a nice smile, nice joyful guy, very calm, collected. I could see him out in the field, definitely working, definitely giving people tickets on the highway, 100%.
Next up, we have the interim fencing coach, Adam Kajabowski. So I think really, I don't know why this comes to my mind, but I feel like you could see him on the side of the road in like a chicken costume spinning a sign for some sort of chicken restaurant. I'm not really sure why. I feel like I can just see him walking around the sign there doing a little dance, spinning this sign and trying to bring in customers to a restaurant.
Next up is probably the most well-known face on the Penn State campus, James Franklin, the head football coach. When I see James, or Mr. Franklin, or Coach Franklin, however you want to call him, I could definitely see him with a clipboard and a whistle. I mean, he already has a clipboard and a whistle, but I could see him coaching up the middle schoolers on the playground or in the gym as a middle school gym teacher. I could see him definitely like orchestrating the fitness grand pacer test 100%, as blowing the whistle and telling kids to run faster when they're running slow. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think if you show up in a James Franklin's gym at like 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, you're going to get the work in badminton easily.
Oh, yeah.
Next up, we have Greg Nye, who's the golf coach here. And we both thought that he looks kind of like a math teacher or even a guidance counselor. He just seems like a really, like, I don't know, just some guy you could talk to.
He seems like a very upbeat guy, too. He doesn't seem like a very hardcore kind of guy, so a guidance counselor fits him perfectly. Next up is Randy Jepson, the gymnastics coach. He kind of looks like, I said he's a middle school administrator because he kind of looks like my middle school administrator. I mean, in that picture he kind of looks happy, but I could definitely see him like yelling at kids down the hallway for like cutting class or like not or late to class or something like that. And my middle school administrator looked like that, so that's why I gave him that.
Granted, will definitely call you out if you have exposed shoulders and you're violating the school's dress code.
100%.
Next up, we have Guy Gadowski, the hockey coach here. So we both were like thought we were dead on with this one, but we think he looks exactly like a Wall Street trader. I think definitely works for Morgan Stanley and will tell you exactly how much he makes on a yearly basis.
I think it's definitely like the slick back hair too. I think that definitely like gives it away. I feel like all Wall Street like brokers have slick back hair.
Next up, we have Jeff Tambroni then, who's the lacrosse coach. So I think he looks kind of like a tax accountant. I mean, if you during tax season you're showing up to your local H&R Block, you're going to see Jeff Tambroni there ready to help you out.
Mm-hmm. Next up is Jeff Cook, and he kind of looks like one of those guys in like the commercials you see. There's like the heavy hitters or like Law 1010, those kind of guys. Because I think maybe the glasses gives it away, but he definitely looks like a divorce lawyer or like a car accident lawyer, one of those two. Just purely because of his like kind of his face and the glasses that he's wearing, pretty much.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and last up we have Cale Sanderson, the wrestling coach. If we're being honest, we both think he looks like a wrestling coach. I mean, he's a pretty scary guy. But if I had to put a different job on him, I'd say I'm like a police drill sergeant or something like that.
Yeah, which fits perfectly because that's a pretty scary guy.
On the topic of coaches, Micah Shrewsbury enters his first year as Penn State's men's basketball coach this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and already he's made a ton of moves in the off season, bringing in a bunch of veteran transfers. But what do you think his biggest moves have been?
I think one of his biggest moves is definitely bringing in Jalen Pickett. I mean, he's really racked up the accolades in his time before Penn State. He was the MAC Rookie of the Year, MAC All-Rookie First Team, MAC Player of the Year. He was named to a number of watch lists in his last season before coming to Penn State. The Lute Olson and Lou Henson preseason watch lists for Player of the Year and Mid-Major Player of the Year. And he's just a fun player to watch. I mean, really, he can go out there and get you a bucket at any time. He's going to be kind of a lightning rod for this team. So we'll see where he ends up, kind of on a starting or bench role, but I think he can really provide for Penn State.
Yeah, I think Penn State's biggest loss was Myron Jones, who led Penn State in points per game. But they brought in this Jaheim Cornwell from Gardner-Webb, and he was pretty much their game management, and he averaged 14.1 points per game when Jones had 15.3, which is kind of a little bit less, but he knows what it's like to be a leading scorer. He led the team. He led Gardner-Webb in scoring, and he had 3.8 assists. And his shot percentage from three was 41%, which is actually better than Jones. So a big-time three-point shooter they brought in for Penn State, something they really needed, especially with losing Jones and Brockington, all of them. And he has really good conditioning, and he knows what it's like to carry a team. He had averaged 30 minutes per game, which is a lot.
Yeah, that is definitely impressive. It's going to be interesting between like all those guards that Shrewsbury brought in. I mean, they got a lot of guys who can go out there and score. So, I mean, it's really, I could see there being a fight really for playing time, just seeing who's going to earn that starting role. Maybe it ends up being like a rotation, kind of like platoon system. Shrewsbury's really got himself a lot of options. But, I mean, I just want to highlight another player that he brought in here. Is really kind of the opposite of the first guy I brought in, Jalen Pickett. He doesn't really have quite the accolades, but it's Jelani White. So he may not have the most impressive stats out of all the additions this season, but he really showed up for his team when it mattered in the postseason. He averaged nearly 14 points per game and 5 rebounds in the MAC tournament. And he's going to really show up for the team in the clutch, and I think that's one big thing that Penn State needs. That was a real struggle for them last year. They lost so many close games down the stretch, just they couldn't find that last-second shot, a guy who would really go get them a bucket when they needed it. So, I mean, if White can really kind of insert himself into that role and earn himself some playing time and the trust of the coaching staff down the stretch, I think he's proven that he can really show up when it matters.
Yeah, I think out of all three of the players we mentioned, this player is probably the bigger, like he's the biggest move that Shrewsbury's made as a head coach. And that's bringing in Greg Lee, who's a big body, is at 6'9", 217. He's a little bit more nimbler for John Harrar, but he'll definitely give John Harrar a break, which Penn State really struggled when John Harrar was on the bench. And a guy like Lee coming in will be big because he can fill that gap when Harrar went to the bench. Lee was a rebound machine, had 7.2 rebounds. Only person on Penn State to have higher was John Harrar. And he's very experienced at Western Michigan. He played all 4 seasons with a starting total of, he started 113 games, which is a lot. And he led Western Michigan in assists and rebounds. So he's pretty much just a rebound and assist mastermind, which is something Penn State needed, especially when like Harrar went to the bench, which they just needed a big guy in the paint.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's definitely a noticeable drop-off last year when, Penn State really had to go to their bench guys like Trent Buttrick or even others really didn't have the experience, and they kind of noticeably struggled, especially in the early part of the season against that Big Ten competition there. I mean, it's really a big man's league, and it has been for some time in the Big Ten here. So adding that depth is really a vital component to Shrewsbury's offseason there. And I mean, you mentioned that he's really a rebounding and like assist guy.
Yeah.
But if they can get him to provide some scoring off the bench, I think that's going to be really key to this team too. I mean, John Harris started last season barely being able to score, and then kind of his game evolved over the course of the season. Really found his way to navigate through the paint, get those buckets when the team needed him, and he really ended up being an option for them, and like a legitimate scoring option down the stretch. So if they can coach up Lee and get him to that point as well, I mean, that's going to be huge for this team.
Yeah, especially if they put him in the paint as a defender or even as like a rebound machine. If they just feed him in the paint, all those guards on the outside, it could be very big for Penn State going down the stretch.
For sure. It's going to be interesting to see how these additions play off for Shrewsbury down the stretch. So I think that's all we have for today then. So I can really say for sure that I enjoyed doing this, and I'm just going to look forward to bringing everyone some more podcasts in the future. So we're going to be back next week with another episode of Sports Speak. So
if you want any more content from the Collegian or any news of any kind, visit collegian.psu.edu. And if you like these podcasts or any other digital content from the Collegian, please consider subscribing to the Collegian YouTube channel. And thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your week.